The eviction notice came on a Thursday afternoon. It was a quiet day, the kind I'd been craving for years. No work, no stress. Just me, sitting in my favorite armchair, a book in hand, my mind wandering into the peaceful rhythm of retirement. That peace shattered the moment I opened the letter. Notice of intent to evict. Immediate action required. My eyes froze on those words, the letters blurring as I tried to process them. But then, I saw the signature at the bottom. Her name, my daughter-in-law. The very woman I'd welcomed into my family, treated like my own, was the one behind this. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I felt the blood drain from my face. My breath hitched. I couldn't believe it. She, the woman who married my son, the woman who lived in my home, how could she do this to me? The sting of betrayal hit harder than any business loss I'd ever faced. This wasn't just some paperwork. This wasn't a simple dispute. It was personal. My sanctuary, my home, everything I had worked for, being torn away by the person I had treated as family. I stood there, trembling, the weight of the paper like a heavy stone in my hands. This was the last thing I'd ever expected. I felt my chest tighten, but before I could spiral into the rage bubbling up, I grabbed the phone. I needed to talk to my son. This couldn't be happening. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe, maybe she was just following some ridiculous HOA protocol. It had to be that. I dialed his number. My hands were shaking as I waited for him to pick up. Dad? What's wrong? Jack's voice was flat, almost bored, like he wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Come over now. ISEP just received an eviction notice from the HOA and your wife is behind it. I didn't even have to wait for him to speak. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a long silence. His voice finally broke through. What do you mean? Are you sure? I slammed the letter onto the counter. She sips on the board, Jack. Who else could have done this? I could hear the faint sound of him pacing. His reluctance was obvious. I don't no, Dad. Ted'll come over. I could hear the hesitation in his words. Was he doubting me? Was he trying to justify her actions before even hearing me out? I didn't know anymore. Was this what his loyalty to her had become? By the time Jack arrived, I had already read the letter a dozen times, each time hoping the words would change, but they never did. He walked in, his expression guarded, and his eyes immediately fell to the letter on the counter. I didn't wait for him to speak. It sets her, Jack. She sets trying to throw me out of my own home. He picked up the letter slowly, his gaze flicking between me and the paper, then back to me. His eyes were wide, but there was no emotion in them. I don't understand. Why would she do this? He asked, his voice low. She's been on the HOA board for months. But this, I didn't know it had gone this far. Don't you dare defend her. I snapped, the words escaping before I could stop them. My breath hitched, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't just about a house. It was about trust. It was about everything I had spent my life building, and now it was being ripped apart. I'm not defending her, Dad. I'm just trying to understand, Jack replied, his voice tight. He looked down at the letter, shaking his head, but his body language told me everything I needed to know. I could see it in his eyes, the doubt, the hesitation. He wasn't just defending her, he was questioning me. I've spent my life building this home. It's all I have left, Jack. I gave her everything. And now this. I could feel the weight of my own words, each one sinking deeper into my soul. Jack took a step back, rubbing the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. I talk to her. I get to the bottom of this. I don't need you to talk to her, Jack. I need you to see what's really going on here, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. I turned away from him, pacing the room, trying to hold it together. This isn't about some HOA rules. This is about her wanting to push me out, to take everything I've worked for. She's playing a game, Jack, and you're too blind to see it. He didn't answer. His silence was worse than any argument we could have had. It was the unspoken truth between us now. He wasn't willing to see what was right in front of him. I could feel the anger rising, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not yet. Please, Jack, I said, my voice softer now. Talk to her. But more importantly, Talk to yourself. She sep's not the woman you think she is. She sep's not the person you married. He didn't reply. Instead, he just stared at me, a painful distance forming between us. As he walked out, I could feel the weight of his loyalty to her, the distance that was growing between us. Maybe that was the worst part of all of this. The realization that I wasn't just losing my home, I was losing my son too. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left in the silence. Alone with my thoughts, alone with the betrayal. I walked to the window, staring out at the small garden I'd planted with my own hands. The place I had worked my entire life to create. Was this really how it was all going to end? The eviction notice felt heavier now than ever, but in that weight I felt something else. A spark, something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to lose everything without a fight. Not without showing her exactly who she was messing with. The days after the eviction notice arrived blurred into one long, suffocating cycle. I didn't know whether to scream or just disappear. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage, a place where the walls closed in with every passing minute. But the real suffocation came from inside me. Each morning I woke up to the same silence. No phone call from Jack, no apology from her, just the distant hum of the air conditioning, the same hum that used to bring me comfort. Now it only reminded me of the emptiness growing inside. I went through the motions of daily life, checking the mail, making coffee, sitting on the porch as I always did, but nothing felt the same. The house felt alien now, as if it were mocking me. This was supposed to be my quiet, peaceful retirement. Instead, it had become a battleground. Jack didn't call that day, or the next. His silence gnawed at me deeper than the anger. I knew it was his loyalty to her, but I couldn't understand how he could just ignore this. I was his father. We'd been through thick and thin together. She was his wife, but I was his blood. Didn't that mean anything? I spent hours that night, sitting in front of my desk, staring at the pile of documents. The eviction notice, bank statements, property deeds. I was grasping at any thread, any piece of evidence that might explain why this was happening. But nothing could justify it, not even in my own mind. I couldn't understand her. It had to be more than just the HOA, her ambition, maybe. But she had it all. She had everything. So why take from me? Why hurt the one person who had trusted her? That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't about power or rules or even the HOA, it was about something deeper. She was trying to strip me of my legacy. My home was the last piece of everything I had worked for, and she was trying to take that from me too. It was like she was erasing me from the picture. I couldn't just sit there, wallowing in self-pity. I had to do something. But what? I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd built. That night, I grabbed the old files from my desk. The ones I hadn't looked at in years, the records of the house, the deeds, the transactions. I knew I'd bought the house years ago, but I hadn't realized just how much control I still had over it. I ran my finger across one document, a simple, inconspicuous receipt for a property transaction. My mind raced. I had always kept a low profile about my investments. Quiet, anonymous. I wasn't just a retired businessman. I was an owner, a silent investor. I'd kept the true ownership of the house under wraps, and the rest of my family had no idea. They didn't know that I had made a significant investment years ago, that I owned more than just the house. I had made sure to keep my name out of the public eye. But now I realized that was my leverage. I wasn't just the homeowner. I was the true owner of her property. The realization settled in like cold steel running through my veins. I had something on her. I had leverage. I wasn't just some old man to be pushed around. I wasn't a pawn. I had power and I was going to use it. But before I could act on it, I needed more. I needed evidence. I needed to be sure. The next day, I began gathering everything I could find. Bank statements, emails, property tax receipts, any shred of paper that could prove ownership. I knew it was all legal, all above board. But she didn't. She had no idea. And that, my friends, was my advantage. I reached out to some old contacts. People I trusted, people who knew how to dig deep into the kind of financial webs she had spun. One old friend in particular, Greg, had worked in real estate law for years. He could help me. He could get me the hard evidence I needed. I called him the next morning, trying to keep my voice steady. Greg, I need you to pull some records for me. Private stuff. Real estate HOA dealings. I've been being threatened with eviction, and I think my daughter-in-law is involved. Eviction? From who? Greg's voice was sharp, concerned. It sets the HOA. I need everything on her property, her dealings, anything that could link her to this. You know how this works. There was a pause before Greg spoke again, his voice low. I can get you what you need, but it's set'll take time. You want me to put a rush on this? Yeah, please, make it fast. I hung up, feeling the weight of the next steps ahead of me. I had to play this carefully. One wrong move and I could lose everything. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd earned my place and I wasn't about to let some manipulative woman erase that. The next few days passed in a blur of legal advice and careful steps. Greg came through with the documents I needed, deeds, transfers, and even a few discrepancies that would raise some serious questions if they went to court. But still something nagged at me. Was this enough? Was this really all I needed to prove she was the one behind the eviction? Or was I overlooking something? I had to be sure there could be no mistakes. I knew what I had to do next. I had to get in close. I had to start attending HOA meetings. I had to hear what she was saying, gather more dirt. I couldn't just rely on documents. I needed to see her in action, to hear her manipulative words firsthand. But I wasn't just going to be a passive observer. I'd done enough sitting by the sidelines. It was time to take the first step in what I knew would be a long battle. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, blending in with the other homeowners. She didn't see me at first, too caught up in her own games. But I saw everything. I saw how she weaved her lies, how she used the board to push her own agenda, how she manipulated everyone around her. She wasn't just after my house. She was after the whole damn neighborhood. And I was going to stop her. It was late on a Tuesday when I finally uncovered the truth. I had been staring at the pile of papers for hours, my eyes sore and my mind exhausted, but I couldn't stop. I knew there was something more, something deeper behind my daughter-in-law's actions. The documents were scattered all over my desk, the air thick with the smell of old paper. My fingers trembled as I flipped through deeds, contracts, and property records. But it wasn't until I reached the final folder, the one I hadn't touched in years, that I found the key. The discovery wasn't a single piece of paper or an alarming figure. It was the connection between her property and my own. I hadn't thought much about the investments I made years ago. I'd kept it quiet, kept it to myself. But as I stared at the records in front of me, a cold realization settled in. My name wasn't just on those papers as a homeowner. It was on them as the owner, the sole owner of the property she lived in. I couldn't believe it at first. It didn't seem real, but there it was, right in front of me. Deeds, transfers, and legal agreements, all pointing to the fact that I was the one who had bought her property, the very one she was now trying to evict me from. I had done it years ago, quietly, in a way that no one would notice, not even my own family. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the discovery sinking in. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was no simple conflict. It was strategy, carefully constructed over the years. She had been playing a game, but she hadn't realized who she was up against. I kept the papers close, barely able to breathe as I processed the implications. She had no idea. She had no idea that I held the power to destroy her entire plan. But it wasn't just the shock of the ownership that took me by surprise. It was the realization of how deep this went. She wasn't just trying to get rid of me. She was trying to take everything I had built, my retirement, my security, my future. She thought she could push me out, force me to leave, all because of her need for control. She was playing God with the lives of everyone around her, and I wasn't going to let her win. But this wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about a legacy, my legacy, and I couldn't let her erase it no matter how hard she tried. I picked up the phone and dialed Greg's number. The line rang twice before he answered. Greg, I need you to help me with something. I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the urgency in my own words. "ISEP got the paperwork. ISEP got the deeds, the records, everything. I own her property. I need you to make sure ISEP covered legally." There was a brief silence on the other end before Greg spoke. "You sure about this? You know what this means, right?" "I am sure," I replied, my voice sharp. "She stuff's been trying to evict me. And now ISEF got the leverage. I need you to help me secure this." "You got it," Greg said, his voice firm. "ISEF'll help you, but we SIF got to move quickly. She SIP's not going to back down, and neither are you." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't just some passive victim anymore. I had power, the power to protect what was mine, to expose her for what she truly was. I wasn't just going to sit around and wait for her to destroy me. I was going to take control. But even as the excitement of the discovery began to build inside me, a part of me couldn't ignore the nagging thought that this could destroy everything. Not just her, not just the HOA, but my family. My son. How could I expose her and still expect to maintain my relationship with him? I knew he'd never forgive me if he found out. It would tear our family apart. But could I sit back and let her destroy my life, my home, my legacy, just to keep the peace? As I sat there, the truth weighing heavily on me, I realized something. This wasn't just a fight for my house. It was a fight for my dignity. I couldn't let her win. Not this time. I knew I had to be careful. I knew the stakes had risen, but I was ready. I was ready to fight back. The clock ticked slowly in the background as I prepared for the next steps. The evidence I needed was all in place. But now I had to play it smart. It wasn't just about throwing my weight around or making threats. It was about being methodical, calculated. I had to build my case, piece by piece, before I exposed her. But the real question was, what would I do once I had all the evidence? What was the next step? I took a deep breath and stared at the papers before me. This was my legacy. This was my future. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially her, take that away from me. Not now, not ever. It wasn't enough to just have the evidence. I needed to make sure that when the time came, my daughter-in-law's carefully crafted facade would crumble. The trap needed to be set quietly, patiently. I couldn't just march in and confront her. That would be a mistake. No, this had to be a slow burn, the kind where every step would lead her to her own downfall. I spent the next few days attending HOA meetings, blending in with the other homeowners, pretending to be just another concerned resident. No one suspected a thing. No one knew that I wasn't just a retiree trying to mind my own business. I was a man with leverage, and with that leverage, I could make her pay for what she had tried to do to me. The meetings were exactly as I expected. A lot of talk about community improvement, a lot of vague promises about keeping the neighborhood pristine, but always with the underlying push for more control. And there she was, sitting at the head of the table, just as smug and self-assured as ever, spouting off about new rules, increased fines, and more regulation. Every time she opened her mouth, I had to fight to keep my emotions in check. It was all so calculated. She wasn't doing this to help the neighborhood. She was doing it for herself. But what I didn't understand was why. What was driving her to go this far? Was it power, control, or was it something deeper? Something I hadn't yet uncovered. I had to find out. So I did what I did best. I listened. I watched, and I waited. At first it was small things. A conversation here, a glance there. But as the weeks passed, I started to notice patterns in her behavior. She was more aggressive in her dealings with the board, constantly pushing for things that benefited her, not the community. I overheard her whispering about the new rules she was pushing through and how they'd force the older residents out. I'd never been one to eavesdrop, but I couldn't ignore the words. "That's the goal," she said once, just loud enough for me to hear as she sat at the back of the room, her tone dripping with malice. "Get rid of the old blood and bring in the new, more control, more power." It made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about my home. This was about her agenda. She wasn't just trying to get rid of me. She was trying to transform the neighborhood into her own little empire. But I had my own agenda now, I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not after everything she'd done. I started planting seeds of doubt among the other board members. It was subtle at first. Small suggestions here and there, just enough to make them question her methods. I knew they didn't trust her completely, but they were all too afraid to speak up. That's where I came in. At the next meeting, I casually brought up a concern I had. I've noticed a lot of new rules being pushed through lately, I said, my voice steady, controlled. Rules that don't seem to be in the best interest of the community. Maybe we should have a more transparent discussion about this. Her eyes shot to me, narrowing with irritation, but she kept her composure. The others, however, seemed uncomfortable. Some of them exchanged glances. The tension in the room shifted just slightly, but enough for me to see the cracks. The next step was to get legal advice. I couldn't rely on just gossip and speculation. I needed facts. I needed a solid plan. I contacted a lawyer I had worked with years ago, someone who knew the ins and outs of property law and HOA regulations. His name was Victor, and he owed me a few favors from our old business dealings. Ronan, it's been a long time, Victor said when I called him. What's this about the HOA? Sounds like you've got yourself in the middle of something interesting. I need you to help me make sense of some of the rules they're trying to push through, I said, my voice low. I think there's something illegal going on, and I need to know how to counter it before it's too late. We met at a local diner the next day, and I laid out everything I had, the eviction notice, the recorded conversations, the emails I had retrieved from the HOA board members, and the deeds I had discovered. He listened quietly, nodding every now and then as I spoke. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair, considering everything I had told him. You're sitting on a gold mine, Ronan, he said finally. The HOA can't just make up rules and enforce them without a legal basis. And what she's doing, it's bordering on illegal. You've got a case, but you have to act fast. If you don't, she'll have all her ducks in a row by the time you're ready to fight. I nodded, my mind racing. I had to move quickly, but I also had to be careful. I couldn't let her know that I was onto her. I needed to keep playing the long game. The next HOA meeting came, and I was ready. I had planted the right doubts, gathered the legal advice, and started turning the board members against her without them even realizing it. But the final step was the most crucial. I had to expose her. The trap was set. It was time to pull the strings and watch her fall. But even as the pieces started falling into place, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about saving my home. This was about saving my dignity, and I would be damned if I let her destroy that too. As the weeks wore on, I could feel the pressure mounting. My daughter-in-law's grip on the HOA was tightening, and I could see the signs. She had started pushing through her new rules with more urgency, more aggression. It was almost like she knew something was coming, but she wasn't sure what. The board meetings grew more tense. Every time she spoke, her voice carried a sharper edge, a hint of desperation beneath the surface. She was trying to act like she was in control, but I could see the cracks forming. Her confidence was slipping, and I was watching it happen piece by piece. But I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. As I continued to gather evidence, I began to notice a shift among the other homeowners. The more I subtly questioned her tactics, the more they started to question her too. I could see it in their eyes during meetings. The doubt was creeping in. Still, it wasn't enough. I knew I had to keep my focus. I had to wait for the perfect moment, the right time to strike. But the clock was ticking, and every day felt like I was running out of time. I couldn't let her push me any further. I had to make my move soon. But how? I needed something concrete, something undeniable to expose her once and for all. Then, it happened. One of the HOA members, a woman named Angela, came to me after a meeting one afternoon. She'd been quiet during the previous sessions, but she'd been watching, listening, and now she was ready to talk. I don't know how much longer I can sit by and let her do this, Angela said, her voice low, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. She's been pushing for the eviction of anyone who doesn't fit her idea of the perfect neighbor, but it's more than just that. She's been hiding things. A lot of things. Financial things. My heart raced. I didn't say anything, just nodded for her to continue. Have seen the accounts, she whispered. The ones she SIF's been funneling HOA funds into. There's SIF's no reason for it, no explanation. I don't know how far this goes, but I know enough to say she SIF's been using her position for something more than just enforcing rules. I could barely breathe as I processed what she was saying. I'd known there was something fishy about her, but this was something else entirely. She was stealing from the HOA, and if I could prove it, everything she'd built would come crashing down. Do you have proof? I asked, my voice tight. Angela hesitated. I don't know if it's subs enough to expose her completely, but I've got some emails, some transaction records. It's not a lot, but it's something. I can stand by and watch her ruin everyone. I couldn't believe it. This was the break I needed. The proof that she wasn't just a manipulative HOA member. She was a criminal. The pieces were falling into place faster than I could have hoped. I told Angela I would handle it from there. She didn't need to get further involved. She had already risked enough by speaking out. But I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I contacted Greg again, and when he picked up the phone, I didn't waste any time. Got her, Greg. She's been embezzling HOA funds. Got the proof. I need you to help me gather everything we can to make this stick. You sure about this? You know the stakes, Ronan. You say we're not just exposing her now. You say we're exposing the whole HOA. I don't care anymore. It's time, I said, my voice firm. She needs to be stopped, and I won't let her destroy this community or me. The next few days were a blur of frantic action. I met with Greg and some of the legal team he'd pulled together. We went through the emails, the records, and the financial transactions Angela had managed to uncover. It wasn't just a little bit of mismanagement, it was systematic theft. The more I saw, the clearer it became she had been siphoning funds for months, using her position on the board to cover her tracks. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for justice. I was fighting to expose someone who thought they were untouchable, and with this evidence, she was finally going to be held accountable. But even as the walls closed in on her, I knew there was still a danger. She was getting more aggressive, more desperate. I had to move fast. I couldn't let her outmaneuver me again. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were higher than ever. If I didn't act now, I risked losing everything. Not just my home, but my reputation, my legacy. The very thing I had worked my entire life to protect. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I was ready. I had the evidence. I had the leverage, and it was time to confront her. It wasn't just about protecting my home anymore. It was about exposing her for what she really was. The countdown had begun. The closer I got to the truth, the more I realized just how far my daughter-in-law was willing to go to protect her empire. As I dug deeper into the HOA's financial records, the walls around me seemed to close in tighter. The more I learned about her manipulations, the more determined I became, but with each revelation, the stakes grew higher. I had everything I needed now. The emails, the transactions, the proof of her illegal dealings. Greg had helped me organize everything into a foolproof case. But even with all the evidence, there was still one thing I had to account for. Her retaliation. She wasn't just going to take this lying down. She'd been in control for too long, and I could feel her tightening her grip, sensing that something was about to shatter her carefully constructed world. The tension at the HOA meetings was palpable. Every time she spoke, I could feel her eyes lingering on me, as if she knew I was the one who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. She was trying to keep her composure, but the cracks were starting to show. It wasn't just in her words, it was in the way she carried herself. The arrogance, the sense of superiority she'd once exuded now seemed fragile, as though she was holding on to a facade that was slowly crumbling. But I couldn't let her get away with it. Not now. The more I watched her, the more I realized just how deep her web of manipulation went. She wasn't just after control of the HOA. She had been using it to build her own power base, to push out anyone who didn't fit her ideal vision of the neighborhood. She had convinced everyone she was the one with the answers, the one who was working for the good of the community. But all along, it had been about her control, and about keeping people like me out of the picture. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. I was actively rallying support. The board members were starting to question her methods, and I knew this was my opportunity. I began making quiet alliances, gathering homeowners who were tired of her manipulation, and slowly but surely the tide was turning. There were whispers in the halls, murmurs of discontent. People were starting to see her for who she truly was. But the more I pushed, the more dangerous it became. She wasn't one to back down easily. I could feel her desperation growing. Every time I showed up at a meeting, I could see the fear behind her carefully crafted smile. She knew what was coming, and she was scrambling to hold on to whatever power she had left. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the final set of documents before presenting them to the board, I received a message from Greg. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. He'd found something new. The message was short but clear. She's been using the HOA funds to pay for personal expenses. There's a hidden account. I've got the transaction logs. I felt my pulse race. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. I called Greg immediately. We need to move on this now, I said, my voice tight with urgency. I've got everything ready. I've been building the case. It's time to confront her. Are you sure? Greg asked, his voice cautious. This isn't set just going to end with her stepping down. You know she's set fight back, and she's got a lot of people on her side. I'm done waiting, I replied, my words sharp. She's already crossed a line. I'm not just going to sit back and let her ruin everything I've built. It's time to take the fight to her. The next HOA meeting came quickly, and I could feel the tension in the air as soon as I walked through the door. This time I wasn't just there to observe, I was there to expose her. It was all going to come to a head tonight. I sat at the back of the room, my hands clenched in my lap, the files and evidence at my side. My heart was racing, but I knew this was the only chance I had. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and I wasn't about to back down now. As the meeting went on, I watched her closely. She was still trying to play the role of the confident, in-control leader, but I could see the cracks in her mask. Every time she glanced over at me, there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming, but she didn't know how much I had uncovered. She didn't know that I was ready to bring her down. When the time finally came, I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for just a moment before I spoke. I have something to say, I began, my voice steady but firm. Something I've been waiting to reveal for a long time. Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. I could see the panic in her expression, the way her hands were trembling ever so slightly. I've been collecting evidence, I continued, and what I've found is nothing short of criminal. She's been embezzling funds, using the HOA's resources for her own personal gain, and I've not the only one she's been lying to. I laid the documents out on the table in front of me, bank statements, transaction logs, emails, and the secret account she thought no one would ever find. The room was silent as everyone processed what I had just said. You think you stir untouchable, Denuin that set Bio, I said, my gaze locked on her. But you set her not, and tonight the truth is coming out. The tension had been building for weeks. Every move I made was calculated, every piece of evidence meticulously collected. But the truth was, I hadn't been preparing for the confrontation at the HOA meeting. I had been preparing for this, the family dinner. I knew this was the moment that everything would finally come to light. The one place where I could pull back the curtain and expose her for who she really was. The one place where I had to stand up, not just for myself, but for everyone she had wronged. We were all gathered around the dinner table, just like any other Sunday. Jack, my son, sat across from me, his face a mask of tension. His wife, my daughter-in-law, sat beside him, smiling, laughing as if she had no care in the world. But I knew better. I could see the cracks. The facade was slipping, and it was only a matter of time before she'd be exposed. The air felt thick, suffocating. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every interaction I had with her. She had manipulated us all, and I was finally going to make her pay. But what would be left after the truth was revealed? It was time to confront her, to make her face the consequences of what she had done. to take back control of my life. Jack, trying to keep the mood light, joked about something trivial, but I couldn't focus on anything but the woman sitting beside him. The woman who had tried to destroy everything I'd worked for. The woman who had betrayed me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of small talk, I placed my fork down, my gaze fixed on her. The room seemed to go silent, as if everyone instinctively knew what was coming. Jack noticed my change in demeanor and stopped mid-sentence, looking up at me. "What's wrong, Dad?" he asked. His voice laced with concern, but there was something else in it. Dread. "I think it's time we had a little conversation," I said, my voice calm, but the words cut through the air like a knife. My daughter-in-law, her smile faltering for just a second, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "What's Seps this about, Ronan?" she asked. Her tone still polite, though I could sense the edge beneath it. "Is something going on?" "Oh, there's Seps something going on," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "I Seps had enough of your little games. It's Seps time to tell everyone what you Seps really been up to." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with a tight smile. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice rising ever so slightly. I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "You Steph are not the only one with secrets. You Steph had been hiding a lot from this family, and I think it's Seps time they knew the truth." I pulled the stack of documents from my briefcase, the papers rustling in the silence that now filled the room. I laid them on the table, one by one. Deeds, transaction records, emails, proof of everything. The proof of her manipulation. The proof of her greed. Jack's face slowly drained of color as he saw the pile of evidence. He looked at his wife, his expression one of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. What is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You didn't know?" I asked him, my heart sinking. "She's been embezzling HOA funds, Jack, hiding her personal expenses in the community's accounts. And it's not just a little mistake. She's been manipulating the board, using her position to push people out of the neighborhood, people like me." I saw wedding nay. I watched his eyes flick between me and his wife, his brain struggling to piece it all together. His hand shook slightly as he reached for the documents. He scanned them, his brow furrowing as he read the details. "No," Jack whispered, his voice breaking. "This can't be true." But it was. And now there was no turning back. I turned my attention to her. "You've been lying to us, hiding behind your position in the HOA, using people's trust to line your pockets. And for what? Power? Control? You think you can just push me out of my home like that?" I paused, letting my words sink in. "You think I didn't notice? You think I wouldn't fight back?" Her face was pale now, the once calm facade crumbling beneath the weight of my words. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The shock was too much for her to mask. "You've tried to evict me, but what you didn't realize is that you've been playing a game with someone who knows how to win," I continued. My voice steady, my gaze fixed on her. "I wasn't just a victim, I was waiting for this moment. You've been digging your own grave, and tonight the truth comes out." The silence that followed was suffocating. My son didn't know what to say, his mind racing to process everything. He looked at his wife, his heartbroken expression saying what his mouth couldn't. "I didn't but want to do this, Jack," I said, my voice softer now, almost apologetic. "But you need to know the truth. You need to see what she's Sep's done. This isn't Sep just about me. This is about everything you has trusted her with, everything you Sep believed about her." Jack didn't respond. He just stared at his wife, his eyes full of pain and disbelief. His whole world was falling apart in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. My daughter-in-law finally spoke, but her voice was shaky, filled with fear. "Ronan, I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was doing what was best for the neighborhood. For all of us." "Best for the neighborhood?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "You've been doing what best for you, not anyone else. You've used the HOA as a tool for your own gain, and now it's Sep's time for you to face the consequences." The room was still, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. My son didn't look at her. He couldn't. His world was shattered, and all he could do was sit there in silence. This was it. The truth was out. Her empire was crumbling, and all the lies she had built her life on were being torn down in front of her. And as I watched her face crumble in defeat, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming my life, my legacy, and the peace I had worked so hard to preserve. This was my justice. And tonight, it was finally served. How does this look? I've kept the pacing tight, heightened the emotional stakes, and ensured the tension is at its peak. Let me know if everything feels right before we move on to Act 8. The fallout from that night came faster than I could have imagined. What I had hoped would bring clarity and justice instead set off a chain reaction that shattered more than just my daughter-in-law's carefully constructed life. It unraveled my entire family. The days after the dinner were filled with tension. Every time I looked at Jack, I saw the confusion, the heartbreak in his eyes. He had never seen her for who she really was. How could he? She'd spent years crafting the perfect image, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. But now, all of it was gone. And so was the trust I'd once had in him. Jack tried to talk to me, tried to justify her actions. She didn't set mean for it to go this far, Dad, he said say. You don't set understand. She just wanted to make things better for the neighborhood. She got caught up in it. But I wasn't hearing it. Better for the neighborhood? This was about her, her power, her control. She didn't care about the neighborhood. She was using the HOA as a stepping stone to build her own little empire, and I was just one of the people she needed to step on to get to the top. I couldn't let it go, and I couldn't just ignore what had happened. She had tried to destroy me, and now she was going to pay for it. As I sat with the papers in front of me, trying to figure out my next move, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. My son wasn't speaking to me anymore, not like he used to. He'd taken her side. That hurt more than anything. The house, the property, it all felt irrelevant now. The damage to my family was the real loss. I had no idea how to fix it. Was it too late? Could I rebuild what had been broken? I didn't have answers. But I knew I had to keep going. If I stopped now, if I let her win, then everything I'd done would have been for nothing. The day after the dinner, my daughter-in-law sent me a message. It was short, cold. She asked if we could talk privately. I didn't respond. I knew exactly what she wanted. She was trying to save face, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. But the real kicker came when I got a call from the HOA board the following day. They wanted me to meet with them. She had been removed from her position, not voluntarily, of course. The evidence I had gathered, the criminal activity I'd exposed, had forced their hand. She was no longer in charge, but the damage she had done wasn't easily undone. They wanted my opinion, my input on how the HOA should move forward. It was a strange, hollow victory. I'd taken her down, yes, but at what cost? That afternoon I met with the board members. There were fewer of them now, with some resigning out of guilt, and others simply too scared to keep their positions after what had happened. The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. They all knew why I was there. They all knew I had been the one to expose her, the one to bring the truth to light. But as I spoke, as I laid out my vision for a better, more transparent HOA, I realized something. I wasn't doing this for them. I wasn't doing this for the board. I was doing it for me. I was taking back control. I was finally standing up for myself, reclaiming what was mine. I fish am not here to rebuild what was, I said, looking at the remaining board members. I fish am here to start over, to make sure something like this never happens again. We need transparency. We need accountability. And we need to make sure no one else abuses their power like she did. They all nodded, agreeing with me. But I wasn't sure if they truly understood the weight of what had happened. None of them had been betrayed the way I had. None of them had felt the sting of family turning against them. I knew that even though she was gone from the HOA, her shadow would still loom over me. Jack hadn't forgiven me. Not yet. And maybe he never would. The damage had been done. But at least I had done what was right. At least I had exposed the truth. I left the meeting with the weight of the world still pressing down on me. The paperwork, the legal battles, the aftermath of everything. I wasn't done yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of something I had won. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that something had been lost in the process. It wasn't just the trust I had with my son. It wasn't just the neighborhood or the HOA. It was the fact that this was a battle I never should have had to fight in the first place. Family, power, trust. Those were the things that mattered. And somewhere along the way they had been broken. The hardest part wasn't the fight. It wasn't even winning, it was realizing that the fallout from all of this would never truly heal. No matter what I did next, I couldn't undo the damage. I couldn't fix the broken pieces of my family. But at least I could walk away knowing I had protected what was mine. At least I could say I had fought back. And in the end, maybe that's all that mattered. The courtroom was quiet as I walked in. The weight of everything I had been fighting for, everything I had endured, hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about legal documents or court rulings anymore. This was about justice not just for me, but for the truth to finally be revealed. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, months, really. Every document I had gathered, every conversation I had overheard, every lie I had uncovered was now on the table. The woman who had tried to destroy my life was about to be exposed in front of everyone. I sat down in the witness stand, my palms sweating but my resolve unshaken. The judge called the court to order, and the sound of the gavel striking the wood sent a chill through me. It was real now. No more waiting, no more secrets. My daughter-in-law was sitting across from me, her attorney by her side. She looked confident, as though she could still somehow talk her way out of this. Her composure was a mask, but I could see the cracks forming. She knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. Her attorney stood up first, attempting to dismiss the charges with a series of weak arguments about the HOA's bylaws. Your Honor, there is no concrete evidence to prove that my client has engaged in any illegal activity. All accusations are based on hearsay and personal grievances. We request these charges be dropped. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh, the irony of his words hitting me harder than I expected. It was her who had tried to dismiss me without cause, tried to remove me from my home with nothing more than fabricated claims. Now she was the one trying to wriggle out of the consequences. The judge didn't seem convinced. I said, I'm afraid the evidence against the defendant is substantial. You still need to present more than just doubt to discredit the facts. My lawyer, Greg, stood up next. He was calm, collected, and ready. He presented our case with clarity, methodical in his approach. He spoke of the embezzled funds, the fraudulent transactions, the HOA payments redirected into secret accounts. He laid it all out for the court to see. There was no escaping the truth. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, Greg said, his voice steady. What we have here is not a case of misunderstanding. This is a deliberate, calculated act of theft and manipulation. The evidence is irrefutable. We have the emails, the transaction logs, the bank records. This was not a simple mistake. This was intentional. I could feel the weight of those words settling on the courtroom like a blanket. My daughter-in-law's face was pale now, her hand trembling as she clutched the table in front of her. She was losing control, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The defense tried to argue, but their words fell flat against the mounting evidence. My daughter-in-law, once so confident, was beginning to look desperate. The cracks in her defense were widening with every word, and for the first time I could see her mask slipping completely. As the day wore on, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the anger, the pain. It all felt so distant now, like it had happened to someone else. But as I sat there watching her crumble, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. She had tried to destroy me, to take everything I had worked for, and I had fought back. I hadn't just fought for my home. I had fought for dignity, for the truth, for my family, for my legacy. Finally, after hours of testimony, the judge called for a short recess. I stood up, my legs stiff, my heart pounding. I stepped out into the hallway where Greg was waiting for me. You did it, Ronan, Greg said, his smile reassuring. The case is solid. We're going to win this. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about winning a legal battle. There was a deeper cost to all of this. one that I couldn't escape. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge made his ruling. The verdict was clear: guilty. My daughter-in-law was guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of trust. She was ordered to pay restitution to the HOA and face legal penalties for her actions. I could feel a rush of relief wash over me, but it was bittersweet. The courtroom was silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. The woman who had tried to tear my life apart was being held accountable. But even as I heard the words of the verdict, I couldn't ignore the pain it had caused. As I left the courtroom, I could feel the eyes of the other homeowners on me. They had witnessed the truth unfold. The very people she had tried to manipulate were now looking at me, nodding in quiet approval. The battle was over, but I knew the fight for my family was far from won. Jack still wasn't talking to me. He hadn't been at the hearing. I hadn't expected him to be, but the weight of that absence was heavier than any courtroom victory. I won, yes, but at what cost? The house was mine again. The community was free from her manipulation, but in the end it felt like I had lost a part of myself, a part I might never get back. The courtroom victory felt like a distant echo, its reverberations fading as I left the building. The rush of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and yes, even pride had all but disappeared in the hours following the verdict. The weight of everything that had led to this moment felt heavier than I had anticipated. As I walked back to my car, I thought about what had transpired. Yes, she was guilty. Yes, I had exposed her lies, her manipulation, her betrayal. But as the final gavel struck down and the court adjourned, I couldn't help but wonder, what now? The fight was over, and I had won. But something didn't sit right. The price of this victory was far greater than I had imagined. I had spent weeks in preparation, each step calculated with precision. I had faced her head-on and taken her down with the cold, hard truth. But in doing so, I had lost something I couldn't get back: trust. My son hadn't been there. He hadn't stood by my side. And even though I had secured my home, even though I had fought for justice, the fracture between us remained. Maybe it would never heal. Maybe our relationship would never return to what it once was. I hadn't expected the emotional toll of this battle. The legal victory was clear, undeniable, but it was the personal cost that had left its mark. As I sat in my car, parked outside the courthouse, I replayed the events of the past few months in my mind. It felt like I had been living in a fog, a haze of anger and betrayal, fighting not just for my home but for my sense of dignity. I hadn't wanted this fight, but I had no choice. She had left me no choice. But now that the battle was over, what was left? I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life, and made my way back home. The drive felt longer than usual. I passed familiar streets, familiar landmarks, but they all seemed somehow distant now. I wasn't just returning to my house. I was returning to a life that had been torn apart, one piece at a time, and I wasn't sure how to put it back together. When I got home, the silence of the house was deafening. It was the same house I had fought to protect, the same house that had once felt like a sanctuary. But now it felt empty. It felt like a place I could no longer call home. I walked through the door, my shoes clicking against the hardwood floors, the air still and thick with the weight of everything that had happened. I paused in the entryway, staring at the family photos on the wall. They used to bring me comfort, but now they just served as painful reminders of what had been lost. It was then that I realized I had won, yes. I had taken back my home, my peace, my dignity, but I had lost my family in the process. The phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out to see a message from Jack. He hadn't reached out in days, and I hadn't expected him to. But there it was, his name flashing on the screen. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was this the moment he was finally going to understand? Or was it just another attempt to justify his wife's actions? I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. What was I supposed to say? Could I really forgive him for standing by her, for turning his back on me when I needed him most? I took a deep breath, wiped my hand across my face, and typed back, "Dad'll be home tonight. We can talk then." The message sent, but even as the words left my fingertips, I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Would he apologize? Would he try to explain? The house was quiet as I sat down on the couch, waiting for the evening to unfold. The weight of the past few weeks was still heavy in my chest. The victory felt hollow, like a ghost of something that had once meant everything to me. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. My heart stopped for a second. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and opened it to find Jack standing there. His face was tired, his eyes red as if he had been crying. He stepped inside without saying a word, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. I didn't see it. I didn't understand. I should have been there for you. I should have trusted you." I felt the tightness in my chest ease just a little. He was sorry, and that mattered more than I'd realized. But it wasn't just the apology that hit me. It was the look in his eyes, the honesty. For the first time in weeks, I could see him, really see him. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a man, one who had learned something the hard way, and so had I. I did what I had to do. I said, my voice quieter now. I didn't want any of this, but I couldn't just let her tear everything apart. Jack nodded. "I know, Dad. I see that now. I said I'm sorry for not seeing it before. I said been so blind." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. It wasn't the perfect resolution. It wasn't a complete fix. But it was a start. And in that moment, it felt like a small victory of its own. As he left that evening, I stood at the door, watching him drive away. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing. The fight was over. The truth had been exposed, and I had fought for everything that was mine. I had reclaimed my home, my dignity, and in a way, even my family. But most of all, I had learned something important. Revenge might be sweet, but redemption is far more satisfying. The aftermath was inevitable, but no amount of preparation could have prepared me for the quiet, lingering ache of the days that followed. I had fought for my home, for justice, and for the truth. And yet, now that the battle was over, I was left with something I hadn't expected. An emptiness. It wasn't just the loss of my daughter-in-law. It wasn't just the betrayal or the broken trust with my son. No, it was something deeper than that. It was the sense that despite everything, something essential had been broken, something I couldn't fix. I thought I would feel victorious. I thought that once I had exposed her lies and seen the justice served, the weight of everything would lift, and I'd finally be free. But instead I found myself staring at the walls of my home, feeling more isolated than ever. The space was silent, the quiet unsettling. It was the kind of silence that only came after the storm had passed, after the destruction had been done, and all that was left was the wreckage. Jack had come over a few more times since that night. The night I'd exposed everything, but the air between us had changed. His apologies, his attempts at reconciling, felt like hollow words now. They didn't fix what had been shattered. He was trying. I could see that, but it wasn't enough. How could it be? How could something so fundamental, so ingrained, be repaired with just a few words and a few promises? We talked, of course. There were still moments of connection, moments when it felt like we could move forward, but they were fleeting. The damage had been done, and though I wanted to believe that time would heal the wounds, I knew better. Time didn't heal everything. Sometimes it just allowed the scars to settle deeper. My daughter-in-law's downfall had been swift, but it wasn't without consequence. The neighborhood had shifted. The HOA was in chaos. What she had done, what I had exposed, had shaken the very foundation of the community. People were angry, confused, and unsure of who to trust. The once tight-knit group had become divided, each person questioning the integrity of the people around them. I had become the symbol of the truth, the one who had stood up and fought back. But with that role came something I hadn't expected. Alienation. People didn't know whether to thank me or resent me for what had happened. Some saw me as a hero, others as a troublemaker. No one really knew where they stood anymore. And that made me wonder, had I really fixed things, or had I just started a new set of problems? I spent my days trying to find a sense of normalcy. I would walk through the neighborhood, past the homes that used to bring me comfort, past the places that held so many memories. Everything felt different now. Everything felt unsettled. There was no peace. Then came the phone call that I had been expecting but wasn't ready for. It was from the HOA officially. They wanted to meet with me. A new board had been formed in the wake of my daughter-in-law's departure, and they were eager to discuss how to rebuild, how to restore order. I didn't want to go. I had no desire to sit in that room and discuss the mess she had left behind, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had been a part of that mess. I had been involved in the chaos. I had made it happen, and whether I liked it or not, I had to face the consequences of that. I showed up at the meeting, walking into the room with the familiar weight of everything on my shoulders. The members of the new board were waiting for me, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They were unsure of how to approach me, how to handle the man who had brought down their predecessor, their leader. One of the new board members, a man named Thomas, spoke first. "Ronan, we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today," he said, his voice cautious yet respectful. "We know there's been a lot of tension, a lot of upheaval. We just want to make sure we're doing the right thing moving forward. We're asking for your help, your input." I nodded, not sure how to respond. Help? After everything that had happened, they still wanted my help? I wasn't sure what to make of that, but I sat down, listening as they explained their plans for rebuilding the HOA, for restoring trust, for making sure that something like what had happened under my daughter-in-law's reign could never happen again. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't something I wanted to be a part of, but it was clear that for better or worse, I had been a catalyst for change in this neighborhood, and if I wanted to restore some semblance of order, some semblance of peace, I was going to have to play my part. The meeting went on for over an hour, but by the end of it I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't done. The fight might have been over, but the consequences were still unfolding. The neighborhood, my family, and even my own sense of self, all of these things had been permanently changed. As I left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever truly be the same. I had won. I had done what I set out to do, but now I had to live with the aftermath, and I wasn't sure what that meant yet. The days after the meeting with the HOA board felt like a slow drift into something uncertain. I had played my part, but the sense of resolution I expected never came. I wasn't sure what I had hoped for. Closure, perhaps, or the sense that I had truly restored order to the chaos. But what I found instead was something I hadn't anticipated, a strange, unsettling peace. It was the kind of peace that comes after the storm, when you can see the damage but you're too tired to do anything about it. I had fought for my home, for justice, for the truth, but in the end I found myself questioning the price of it all. Was it worth it? What's left after the dust settles? What's left when the villain has been unmasked, the truth revealed, and the victory claimed? For me, it was the quiet, the emptiness that filled the spaces where my family used to be. My son Jack hadn't spoken to me since the dinner. He hadn't come over, hadn't called. I'd expected that, but that didn't make it easier. I couldn't escape the thought that this wasn't just about my daughter-in-law anymore. It was about everything I had lost in the process. And then, out of nowhere, I received a call from her. My daughter-in-law. Her voice, when she spoke, was softer than I had ever heard it. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a quiet, almost defeated tone. "I know we haven't spoken since everything happened," she began, and I could hear the shakiness in her voice. "But I wanted to tell you that I stepped down. From the HOA, from everything. I'm leaving the neighborhood." I stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Part of me wanted to hear her beg for forgiveness, to see her finally pay for what she had done. But instead I was left with the sound of her quiet voice, the weight of everything she had done now fully sinking in. "I'm sorry, Ronan," she continued. "I know I hurt you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong." There it was, the apology I had waited for, but it felt hollow. I had spent months fighting for this moment, hoping for a confession, for the satisfaction of seeing her admit her wrongs. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like the victory I had imagined. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "It's too late for apologies," I said, my voice softer than I had intended. "You can take back what you done. You can undo the damage." Her silence on the other end of the line was heavy, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But she didn't. She kept talking. I know I understand that now. I didn't want to lose everything. My family, my place here, but I'm willing to leave it all behind if it means making things right. For you, for Jack. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her to remind her of the months of pain she had caused. But instead, I found myself wondering if it was enough. Could I forgive her? Could we rebuild? Or had we crossed a line that couldn't be undone? Jack isn't still speaking to me, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I still am sorry. I never wanted this to happen, but I don't still know how to fix it. I don't still know how to make things right. The silence between us stretched on. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the final act of the drama that had been unfolding for so long. The ironic twist. She had lost everything, and yet, in losing it, she had finally seen what she had done. But the cost was too high. I don't set know if I can forgive you, I said honestly, my voice steady. I don't set even know if I want to. But I set not the one you need to apologize to. It sets Jack. He sets the one who sep's been hurt the most. I know, she whispered. I know try. I know to whatever it takes to make things right. I ended the call soon after, and the moment I hung up I felt the weight of everything settle back onto my shoulders. I hadn't expected her to leave the neighborhood, and I certainly hadn't expected her to apologize. But that didn't change the fact that I had lost something much more important than I could ever put into words. Jack. I hadn't heard from him since that night at the dinner. He had been avoiding me, and in a way I understood why. I had exposed his wife for what she really was. I had torn apart their world in front of him. But the reality was, I hadn't just lost my daughter-in-law. I had lost him too. A few days later, Jack called me. I picked up the phone, unsure of what to expect. Dad, he said, his voice strained. I need some time to think. But I want you to know I don't set blame you. I didn't set that. This is a lot. I don't set know what I set doing, and I don't set know how to fix this, but I set not giving up on you. I set not giving up on us. I just need time. And in that moment, I realized something important. We weren't done yet. This wasn't the end of our story. It wasn't the end of our family. We had been broken, yes, but we could rebuild. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick, but it would be worth it. As I hung up the phone, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The final irony was this. Even after everything, even after the destruction, we still had a chance. And maybe that was the real victory.